Thank you. I have a lot of information to go over and not a lot of time. Last time I timed this out, it was 25 minutes. So hopefully this goes a little bit better. Here. If you want to contact me, feel free to. But we will keep going. This is in progress. It might change, not so much the key features, but some details may change as I get a better understanding of everything that's going on in the body. This project is also self-funded, meaning I work full-time at the same time, so I do this as much as I can. And it's just me. I'm the only one who's working on this project. Hope is to inspire now, come back in 2 years to actually talk more, and then report again in 2030. Hopefully I'll finish my nutrition section and I can focus more on exercise. That'll make more sense as we continue. So we use, these are our current models in just measuring metabolism. I'm going to be investigating calories specifically, calories in, calories out, and trying to understand the validity of it, just try to get a deep understanding. What we understand now is thermogenesis and metabolic work are interchangeable, essentially. So the calories in, calories out, whatever you eat turns into this energy, this heat, and we can measure that in order to determine the total energy in the body. This was originally, system we use today is from Olin Atwater, Wilbur Olin Atwater. The first time I read about his publication, other people have cited earlier writings from him, but the first one I've seen is 1894. The one that is referenced today is usually the 1902 model publication. As you can see here, it's referenced in the veterinary science book. This is the original, and this is our modified. It's a very slight change to our calculation on the 494 rule. There are alternatives. Sorry that the slide got a little messed up. This has a lot of information on it. All I need you to focus on is this last part where we're still using the the energy. They're still measuring it in kilocalories as well. So we're still using this heat measurement to relate back to our metabolism. From his quote, the amount of heat given off in the oxidation of material is called the heat of combustion, and is taken as the measure of its latent or potential energy. The unit is commonly called the calorie. It might be in the way, but the USDA was adopted in 1897 with the Atwater-Rosa experiments, and it's what we still use today. This idea that respiration and combustion has been as old as Western philosophy. The farthest back I could trace it back was Heraclitus, where he said, everything in the world, even gods and men, are made of fire. This would go on to inspire Aristotle's model of metabolism and of thermoregulation. As you can see on the left, the food comes into what would be the body, it converts into blood, and that creates fire and combustion in the heart, and the lungs bring in air to cool it down. That's Aristotle. This would eventually continue into our origin of calories, which was not with Atwater. He got this from Max Rubner. Max Rubner was a German physiologist. He produced this 494 rule between 1883 and 1894. The reason for the 10-year marker is because his supervisor delayed his publication. He didn't agree with his results. But it is from obituaries, and all the evidence says that he's the one who originates that 494 rule. He is also the one who discovered the surface area law of heat, so that metabolism can be measured by the surface area as proportional to the surface area. And this is going to lead into the 494 rule that we use today. In context, in his experiments, an animal that is starved and freezing can maintain body temperature by roughly 4 kilocalories per gram of carbs and protein, or 9 kilocalories per gram of fat. And that is going to be the essential basis of the 494 rule. And it's not a very big sample size as well. His experimental sample size, I don't think, would be very well credited today. But this idea is that the law of the maintenance of energy, so the law of conservation of energy, which was a few years earlier from Helmholtz, which we'll get into, assures us that if we understand one form of energy, we can understand other forms of energy. So that way we can use heat measurements and chemical measurements interchangeably. And that's how we get to our indirect calorimetry today. As Rubner quotes, Lavoisier was the first scientist to take the physical aspect in addition of the chemical observations for the metabolism of animal bodies. He was very concerned about the heat of the body, how the body is able to maintain heat through the chemical changes. And as Lavoisier quotes, and others, that the heat is a result of unique combustion of nutritional materials in the cells. Lavoisier thought this happened in the lungs. It'd be Liebig, 2 generations above Rubner, who would say it goes into the blood and diffuses and combusts into the cells. These theories were only proven by Myron Helmholtz. He spells it with an E. I'm not sure why. That heat and work are essentially related, and we can understand one, we can understand the other. So we're going to slowly work into this. This is Mayer. He comes up with, it contributes to the law of conservation of energy. Mainly, he's talking about how the energy of light is able to be converted into chemical energy. That was his first theory. He is trying to understand how this heat and work situation can work. How can you raise 1 pound of, how can you raise up weight and at the same time with that equivalent to a heat transfer unit, essentially. Sorry, I'm stumbling on the words. But this would be proven by James Prescott Joule with his mechanical equivalent to heat. Hermann von Helmholtz is also very prominent into the energy is conserved scene. He's also into electrochemical dynamics, chemical thermodynamics, and the mechanics of thermodynamics. He's also a big physiologist. He studied the psychology and the physiology of vision. He got us out of the idea that visions are impressions into the eye and into sign theory, where they're translated into different stuff. He also has philosophies that we can't really know reality. He's a very interesting guy. I got his information from Anson Robbenbach, who passed away earlier this year. His book, The Human Motor, is a fantastic book. He also attributes Rubner's thermodynamic energy as being valid, but he introduced me to Helmholtz and all of his ideas. And essentially, Helmholtz's entire idea of conservation of energy is based on not watching machines, but watching the human body, and making the human body the model for how machines conserve energy, and not the other way around. Schrodinger also, in more modern times, would talk about a little bit about menus. In the first paragraph, we don't have time to get into all this. The first paragraph, you can see that he calls the menus absurd, but to be fair, he called everything absurd. In this chapter, I think he's being a little tongue-in-cheek. And in the second paragraph in this note, he says that it's quite right that we measure the energy because we can't exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen. And I think it's these unfortunate conclusions by physicists that lead us into the day where we think thermodynamics is the right way, because obviously comparing these two, he hasn't really investigated if he's calling it absurd in his main body of text, and then a simple conversation, he's like, maybe it's useful. I think he's just leaving the door open rather than making a definitive conclusion. One of the biggest misconceptions in physics is the conservation of energy. It is not a universal constant. This was proven by Emmy Noether while she was working on trying to find solutions for Einstein's general relativity, because there were a few paradoxes. One of them was this idea of redshift in light. Where does the energy go from light if energy is conserved in the universe? And the simple answer is energy is not conserved in the universe. Energy is conserved in systems of symmetry. So when there's angular momentum conserved, it means that the physics are the same from the beginning to the end. For energy to be conserved, the physics of time needs to be the same in the beginning and the end. So the reason why energy is not conserved in the universe is because time changes the physics. The light expands. The physics were supposedly different at the Big Bang, and they will be different at wherever we're going to end up. And so really, it just comes down to a question of, if we conserve energy, do we conserve time? But biology is noticeably asymmetric in time. We get older, we work out, and we get tired. And if both of those things happen at the same time, we get really tired and you start to feel the pain. And we've had this idea that respiration is combustion, even from Faraday, who talks about this in his history of a candle, that it's more than an analogy. This is before we had the evidence to confirm that how oxygen and respiration in the body were done. That would be by Carl von Voigt. He is credited with perfecting calorimetry and understanding metabolism. It is with Max von Pentenkoffer, but Voigt is credited with being the founder of modern nutrition, essentially. He is, like I said, perfected calorimetry, measuring all the gases. And one of the things he noticed is that if you breathe more, you're not going to get hotter. Your body's not going to get hot no matter how fast you breathe. You're going to just stay nice and cool. And this is different than technically the combustion method. Well, what I meant to say here was, as you work, the way to generate more oxygen would be to raise your metabolism. So it's not oxygen generates combustion, it's metabolism generates oxygen demand. And this specifically is not not exactly the same as a combustion fire, where if you do add more oxygen, you do add more fuel, you do get more hot. So this is the first time there's a question of a scientific question into the validity that respiration and combustion are related. This is why his paper, Max Rubner, would be delayed by 10 years, because he did not agree with this result. Voigt himself thought the muscles were moved by protein turnover, and he was able to disprove that with his experiments of urine, nitrogen in urine. He was the first to do that. Wilbur Atwater would learn German to travel and study with Voigt. And during this time, he would also pick up the 494 rule from Max Rubner, bring it back to America, write his 1902 publication, and get associated with the system today. This would get spread around the world before it would come back to America in 1902. As you can see, it was also used in World War I to ration troops for both sides across the West. Someone who made it popular in America was Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters, a pioneer in women's medicine. The first female intern at Los Angeles General Hospital. She would also head the infectious disease unit, I believe. She would write this book, Diet and Health with the Keys to Calorie, in 1918. She would then leave for the Balkans on a Red Cross mission. When several awards come back, her book is a bestseller. She would go on a national speaking tour, and in this way, it became very popular. Radio is just coming around. She might be the world's first ever health influencer, talking about calories, just by happenstance. Her book is very enjoyable to read. I highly recommend it. As you can see from her book, the picture is actually drawn from her nephew that she includes in there. The general fattening value is the caloric value and the fattening value. And for her, she says, depends on the amount of fat and degree of concentration. But it reminder at this point, any food eaten beyond what is your system requires for energy is growth, repair, and fattening is fattening, an irritant, or both. Sorry, I'll try to slow down, but I know I got a lot to cover. And she cites the Atwater 1902, the 142 is the 1902 publication. The amount of heat given off in oxidation is the unit commonly called the calorie. That is what she is citing. And that gets us back to where we are today. Essentially, that's the full loop. And so let's investigate this kind of on an evidence claim. Even today, we reference that Lavoisier was the first to demonstrate the cellular site of respiration and combustion was whole animals, even though Lavoisier died in 1794 and the mitochondria wouldn't be discovered until about 1850, 1840. So this reference by a credible source like the Britannica is frustrating. This would be the world's first calorimeter. It's just called machine because the word the calorie was not invented yet. The idea was ice melting instead of just water transfer. So as Lavoisier can measure it, as heat is applied to the ice, the water will melt. The water on that surface level will maintain just roughly above freezing temperature. As more heat is added, that water doesn't change temperature, but more water melts. This implies the heat is transferred directly through the water and into the ice to be captured. So the problem with thermometers is they capture an average and it takes a while for them to grow. But if you were to take an experiment and put it all in ice, the outside air would not affect the inside, and the inside on the reverse would not affect the outside. So the chemical reaction, you can measure the heat transfer directly. That was the question he was trying to answer. These experiments would be done with Pierre-Simon de Laplace. I know we use the capital L for the Laplace, but this is actually how you spell his name. It is de Laplace. And this is his conclusion we still cite from 1783. Respiration is combustion because of the similar compounds. This is also when chemistry was just being invented. This is when we're just discovering the vital air, carbon dioxide, and the or non-vital air is carbon dioxide, and the vital air, the oxygen. The calorie would not still be defined for another 7 years or 6 years. That would be in the world's first chemistry textbook, Elements of Chemistry. The one on the left is this French version. The middle one is the first English translation. The one on the right is my copy edit. You can get for free. And so you can read the first chemistry textbook if you want, where he first defines the calorie, the first chapter. It's an amazing book. The calorie was gathered from an estimated 23 years of research. And the idea is it's this measure of repulsive force, whatever it can be measured at abstract. In Lavoisier in physics, there is 3 fundamental forces. There's the, at least for matter, there's the attractive force that brings matter together. There's the repulsive force that pulls it apart with heat. And then we need this atmospheric pressure. Otherwise, there would be no difference between the attractive force and the repulsive force. It would go from either being all together or completely spread apart. So we need this atmospheric pressure in order to allow experiments to continue. He did not, in the book where he defined calories, comment at all about body heat. He did not comment about his original respiration as combustion. He wanted this to be a very sterilized book on chemistry. He would unfortunately die 5 years after this publication during the French Revolution, because he was a part of the, he invested in the tax collecting system that was outsourced from the government. And they did eventually, a year later, apologize. But so from Aristotle to Atwater, we've always thought respiration is a type of combustion. It is both ancient and modern. We still cite this today, whether it's from the Britannica or other ways. And I want to get into this question of what is combustion then? So we talk about, even Merriam-Webster has defined slow combustion as something else in the body. So I know combustion to be fast and rapid. What else in the world is this slow combustion? So I Googled, and I try to find out. And the other things were rusting was basically the only other thing I could find that was slow oxidation. So is rusting slow oxidation? India's biggest education technology company says, yes, it is. So is digestion. This is a form of combustion. Other people say no, like AI and other people online have said no. So I'm just trying to understand what even is combustion at this point. So I go to Florida State. They have their technical definition, as well as study.com, that is these hydrocarbons reacting with oxygen to create carbon dioxide and water. But there's a problem with this because there's hydrogen combustion, there's phosphorus combustion. Those aren't with a carbon source to begin with, and they don't produce a carbon source at end. Even Lavoisier knows this in his book at the beginning. So does rust produce CO2? Not by our chemical equations. So this formula from our state college is incorrect. That's freely available online. And we'll change this idea of carbon and oxygen being needed as we get into the modern age and with modern physics. This is a nuclear combustion. And as the nuclear bomb combusts inside the bomb before it ever touches the oxygen, it is this chain reaction explosion where each intermediary process creates the next process. And that's because that is what a chain combustion actually is. It's a chain reaction process, not just any oxidative process. It necessarily needs this avalanche feedback, so that way it can have this combustion in this heat. And that is going to, well, I'll talk about Lavoisier on that in a second, but this is actually a problem in chemistry in general. This study from the University of Washington noticed that all of these chemistry students from different levels, grouped by their level, did not understand that combustion could happen without oxygen or carbon dioxide, or they would always put that at the end of their formula, that they produce carbon dioxide, or it always needed oxygen. Which suggests that they don't really understand the principles behind. So this is an actual example of carbon combustion, where the intermediaries continue the reaction forward. And the definition by Lavoisier is not every oxygenation implies direct combustion. It needs that heat and that light to be disengaged. The caloric is, or this is also just further on the chain reaction case, something that we still use today. There's different types of energy transfer without combustion. Just to be clear, there's kinetic, a gradient on a battery, and radiation. That battery one is going to be most important for us. Again, because we can have hydrogen cells where we have the exact same equation for hydrogen combustion, but this is, I don't think anyone would call this a hydrogen combustion fuel cell. They're different thermodynamics. And so we can review again the cellular respiration. We know the equation up top is correct. Food and oxygen go in, energy, CO2, and hydrogen come out, and water come out. So let's check it out. The food goes in, it becomes this acetyl group, and this acetyl group is going to be the main focus of everything we move for here, at least for me. It attaches to this coenzyme, and then that gets reintroduced into the citric acid cycle. All of these macronutrients can turn into this acetyl group. This acetyl group is going to be the key for weight loss and weight gain. This is essentially the transition. It is used in fatty acids, hormones. It's used across multiple things, but the most important thing is that it comes from these nutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins, not any other nutrient. And it can be stored as body fat. This is what we would consider the traditionally caloric nutrient. If we had to put it into a chemical form, it would be acetyl. Krebs cycle is anaerobic. It produces the CO2, but it is not from an oxygen transformation. It is from the acetyl from our food and from water that we drink. So the oxygen we breathe is never transformed into CO2. The oxygen we breathe is transformed into water in the electron transport chain, which is disconnected from the carbon that we use. It uses a hydrogen after the NAD and FAD are reduced, but that hydrogen is then decomposed, and we use the elements of the hydrogen, the positive proton and the electron, in order to move through the Those are my seconds. Okay. And so you cannot combust carbon with oxygen if they never come in contact with each other. I am going to get into the workshop next, but essentially the sliding filament is the same thing. I was trying to ask tropomyosin dynamics. How does calcium move the tropomyosin if calories are the energy to move things? How else does tropomyosin move? It's from the electromagnetic pressures. The energy from biology comes from our atomic structure, basically. The same energy that gives proteins the ability to fold and create conformational changes is the same energy we use to move. And our body just mediates those chemicals in order to create that movement. I don't really have time for anything else. I was going to talk about oxidation. Modern physics, it basically, the idea is, Rubner's idea is that we can't understand the material energy, and modern physics says different. All of our calories are before modern physics. We had it in the USDA guideline the same year we discovered the electron, before we had a model of the atom. And so this hopefully a paradigm shift going through the physics, everything we need to understand the electron transport chain, to understand everything we need to actually understand the myosin transport, or the myosin action in progress. So these are my deductions. I suppose I could start here, but there are classical thermodynamics. Classical thermodynamics can't explain atoms. Nutrition and energy in that is from atomic structures. Thermodynamics is from acetyl. Two different thermodynamic pathways, whether it's coupled or uncoupled, for heat or for exercise. And the missing theory, especially note they're changing assumptions. Energy is not conserved, but mass is. Metabolic thermogenesis and metabolic work aren't exchangeable. Thermogenesis is an element, but material exchange is equivalent for metabolic work. Very sorry for how fast I'm going. But this is the end of this presentation. What's happening is electromagnetic conformations from the energy of the atom. When they bind, they create shifts. Those shifts create larger changes into the cell. Those larger changes in the cell create movement for you. This creates heat. Different temperatures create different conditions for chemistry. We need to maintain a certain amount of temperature for our chemistry to work, for that material exchange to function properly in the right kind of chemistry. Oh,